Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about Batman versus Robin #1, Mark Waid, Mahmud Asrar, absolute all-star creative team on this one. And I am going to spoil key elements of the book, specifically what they've been marketing Batman versus Robin around, besides Batman fighting Robin, the return of Alfred, as well as some of the other key components of the story, but I will not actually spoil the plot itself. So be warned, I'm going to talk about the return of Alfred. Let's get right into it. And yes, he does come back in this comic book issue. And if you were waiting to see the return of Alfred to the DC Comics universe, I think you were going to be very happy with this comic book. He arrives on a rainy evening at Wayne Manor, and obviously Bruce Wayne is very surprised to see him and doesn't believe that he can be real. Alfred is very confused, and the last thing he remembers is actually being murdered by Bane during the City of Bane story from Tom King. Bruce does the right thing. He runs him through his paces, makes sure that this is the right Alfred. We do get some hints throughout the story as to why he has come back or what has drawn him back to this. But this appears to be the real return of Alfred, and I think a lot of Batman fans are going to be very happy about that. The conversation and the dialogue between Bruce Wayne and Alfred is absolutely spot on. It's perfect. It's what you would expect from Mark Waid, somebody that knows DC Comics lore, the characters so well. It absolutely felt very refreshing to see Alfred in the comic book. Such a strange decision on the part of DC Comics to kill off the character. Tom King himself, the writer on Batman that did City of Bane, has said he didn't mean to kill off Alfred. It was supposed to be a plot device where essentially Psycho Pirate made Damian see that, but Alfred didn't really die. But DC Comics editorial decided to keep it in there, and then of course they launched a bunch of cash grabs on the death of Alfred. So I guess that's why they did it. They saw money, 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 and they decided to make this death permanent. He has returned. I don't know if by the end of Batman versus Robin, Alfred will still be in the DC Comics universe, but by the time this is over, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths will probably be winding down, and we might get a full reboot or reset on the DC Comics universe. I have heard the rumor that in January, Batman will be resetting to a #1 issue, indicating there might be a line-wide reboot coming in the future of DC Comics. Now let's talk a little bit more about the story itself. As I mentioned, they do hint that all might not be well with Alfred in his return. We get this opening page from Mahmud Asrar. His mother is the daughter of the Demon, making him heir to the Al Ghul family legacy. His father is the Dark Knight detective, who over time trained young Damian Wayne to be a hero. Then tragedy struck. The boy, convinced he had failed a loved one, realized he was still deeply divided, unsure of his true legacy, so he set out on his own, desperate and determined to find that which might at last make him whole. Be careful what you wish for. Certainly a dark omen regarding the future of Damian Wayne, and be careful what you wish for because Alfred is back. That is what he wanted. We certainly saw Alfred a lot during the Robin series from Joshua Williamson, specifically on Lazarus Island, and all of that is tying into this story. If you like the Joshua Williamson Robin run, specifically the Lazarus Island tournament, and you like Batman versus Superman World's Finest, the first story arc with the Devil Nazar, you're probably going to like this story. It contains all this. I personally like both of those comic books. I don't love this, but I do like it. I do appreciate it. I do want to say the art by Mahmud Asrar, which is normally stellar, feels a little bit off in this issue. Definitely not on his A game like he was on King Conan with Jason Aaron over at Marvel Comics. Just a little bit off, but otherwise it does look very good. After Batman has determined that Alfred is indeed back, and this is really him, they go down to the Batcave and they discover there is Damian Wayne, and he's brought back up. In particular, this is the worst page of comic book art in this. It appears Damian Wayne is very upset at his father and determined to come out and kill him. That's why he's got these two young men, both of whom do appear to be possessed by something. And we do get an old-fashioned Donnybrook. We get a big old fight, and we learn a little bit about Tim Hunter and what he's doing, as well as Jakeem Thunder, the character who has the ability to call up a genie, what he says so cool, and you see him ride a dinosaur and some stuff like that, kind of fan servicey stuff. Both of these characters who are backing up Damian Wayne in this story are magic based, and that is important to keep in mind because something is happening with magic. While I do really like the voice of Bruce Wayne and Alfred in this comic book story, I don't like the voice of Damian Wayne. It just feels really off. Now keep in mind, he is possessed by something. Something is controlling Damian Wayne, so I guess it makes some sense that the character wouldn't sound like himself. But I personally found it kind of off-putting, kind of takes you out of the story. We get this encounter where Batman and Alfred are trying to flee Damian Wayne stops them and he says, I thought I could get past our disagreements, father. I thought there was some way to be the son you wanted, but I found something from your own past that finally opened my eyes. End of the line, father. I'm sure you're disappointed by such a banal choice of weapon, but it's simply too fitting to pass up. My parting gift to you, father, closure. The Batman's life ends as it begins. I only wish you were wearing pearls. Obviously referring to the death of Bruce Wayne's parents, the grandparents of Damian Wayne. I understand he's possessed, but at this point, he's actually already seen Alfred and they've already talked to each other. And supposedly that's the paradoxical event that's kind of driving him over the edge that got him to this point. So you would have hoped to see like a sign or a brief moment of the old Damian Wayne as maybe the good side comes back out, but it doesn't really happen. And I think that throws the story off. There's a lot to do with magic in this. Batman ends up going to see Zatanna because he has a key. It'll open any door and go straight into her house. And he finds her in a very awkward position that I will not put on the computer screen because I did personally find it off-putting. But she does explain there are things happening, specifically Swamp Thing and Constantine are merging or something. Also, something's happening with Jason Blood. And she says, the one punishing us is intent on making us suffer. She also lets Batman know this must be stopped. Something in the aether is terribly, terribly wrong. It's Damian's doing. And then she gives him a couple of tips on what he needs to do or maybe where he needs to go if he wants to take down Damian and fix whatever's happening with magic at the moment within the DC Comics universe. In Robin versus Batman #1, we do get an image at the very end, which I won't spoil here. But if you've been reading Batman versus Superman World's Finest and the Robin series from Joshua Williamson, I think you'll know who's behind all of this. It's pretty much been foreshadowed for well over 6 months now where this story is going to come from, but I won't spoil it here. I like this comic book. I do like it. I don't want people to get the wrong impression, but I don't love it. I don't like it nearly as much as I like the Joshua Williamson Robin series, and I certainly don't love it nearly as much as I love Batman Superman World's Finest, but it is still a quality comic book being put out by DC. If you like Alfred, if you like those two series that I talked about earlier, I think this might be the comic book for you. But don't be expecting like a 5-star comic book because that's not what you're going to get. I would call this like a 3.5, maybe a 3-star comic book. Definitely a recommend, but not on like the highest level of DC Comics that they're putting out right now, but definitely worth your time and money. Now, if you're new to the channel, or perhaps you've forgotten what happened to Alfred and why he's no longer with us within the DC Comics continuity, I actually made a video on this. I'm definitely going to advertise it to you right now. You might like this, talking about what Tom King did to Alfred, how this happened, and why it was a terrible mistake all the way back then. It's still a mistake, and it feels like they're fixing it right now. If you're on a mobile device, there's a link in the video description.